I had a completely weird way of getting into the music business, which was I was a journalism student. I got a master's in journalism from the University of Massachusetts, and I was looking for a job in New York back in 1972. And I went on 2 or 3 job interviews and kept getting, just applications handed to me. Didn't even really get to talk to anybody, talk to a secretary or whatever. And I went to a party one night and met this guy who had worked in a recording studio, and he was working with John Lennon. And I was such a music fan in those years. I was a guitarist, and I was like a crazy music fan. So I couldn't believe he was the first person I ever met that worked in a recording studio, let alone work with one of the Beatles. So I was just beside myself. And a couple of months later, I get a call saying that this guy was working at the studio, and they needed somebody to drive a truck to go to record a concert down in North Carolina. Yes was the group. So I was working in a shoe store at the time. And I had no connection with the music business besides going to this party and meeting this guy. That was the one connection. So I showed up and I drove the truck for a week, drove the truck back, met a couple of guys there, and just started to kind of go over there and hang out with the guys, and was eventually offered a very low-paying job just being a helper. Had no technical background. I basically was a very, very lightweight, folk guitarist. And I just learned from being on the ground at Record Plant Studios in New York, which at that time was just an amazing studio. New York Dolls, John Lennon was there all the time, and Bowie was there. It was just an amazing, but Springsteen was there all the time. It was just a place where everything was happening, so I got just unbelievably lucky. And when I meet kids now who spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 getting trained to do a technical job, I just realize that no matter how much they know, if they're not in that right spot where their talent or their enthusiasm can be discovered, it's just going to go for naught. You have to kind of combine all those elements. Recently, I worked with John Mayer. I've done a whole bunch of Sarah McLachlan albums. I kind of specialize, I guess, in that because I think I'm known for getting vocals to kind of sound as good as they could possibly sound post-mix. I have a whole bunch of clients, jazz clients. Tenor saxophone, Josh Redman, Joe Lovano, Michael Brecker, Branford Marsalis. I kind of, in my head, in my ears, I have that sound planted so that I can take a mix, which maybe isn't quite there, and enhance it to the point where it really is at maximum quality for the listener, I also do lots of world music, Youssou N'Dour. It's almost seasonal. If you have a hit, like the John Mayer album that I did will be out in a couple of months, and I guarantee you that next year, from Europe or from Japan, I'll be getting the John Mayer, the artists who are kind of modeling themselves after John Mayer. Back in the early 80s when I did Lenny Kravitz's albums, I started getting a whole bunch of work from Europe and from Japan, which had the kind of really elemental rock, classic rock sound that Lenny had. So the clients kind of generate other clients, and there's kind of a web that moves along. And I know a couple of years ago I had done one hip-hop album. The guy's name was Tricky. I just did one album. And a guy from Germany came about a year later, and he had 2 hip-hop albums. And I listened to them. I was astounded. I said, why did you come to me with this music? I never do this music. He said, well, you did this Tricky album. It sounded fantastic. I said, yeah, but that's the only one I did. So, it's just kind of an organic generation of whoever really shows up here and how successful those records are. Many of the records that I get are not records that the general public hear about, but musicians will find them. I did an album last year, a band from Austin called Spoon. And I don't know how Spoon got to me, but I did the Spoon album, and I must have got 6 albums this year with these kind of indie rock, college radio rock bands that were from the Spoon album, or Interpol. I did Interpol, and I got another album called, I forgot the name of it, but it was a similar thing. It was like 80s, kind of a modern version of 80s music. And then sometimes, you get, I just did an album by a group called Bad Brains that had been around for forever and ever, and going back to when I used to do the Ramones back in the 70s, I did all the punk stuff. So, people choose you based on, I think, the emotion that they have with the records that they love. They'll flip them over, they'll see the names on there, and you get an identification, which doesn't necessarily have to do with how well you mastered the record. It has to do with the identification that the person has with the record and with the people that are on there. So sometimes it's a surprise when they come in and see some of the other work that I've done, and it doesn't really match the what they had in their head as far as what I do. So that's kind of how mastering works. That's how people pick us, and how we continue to work after so many years of doing this.